Welcome to the Museum of Everything podcast. We're Dan and Josh, the co-curators of the Museum of Everything. We're here to discuss art, culture, history, and the Museum of Everything collection, and especially James Bond. We're in the last James Bond episode, the best of the best, the top 5 James Bond films of all time. But before we get there, we're going to start, as usual, with Museum of Everything pub trivia. So, Josh, what is your first question to me, please?
What is the phone number of the Hotel Pennsylvania on 7th Avenue next to Penn Station?
That would be Pennsylvania 65000.
Very good, very good. I thought I might stump you with that, but that was good.
Well, the only Pennsylvania phone number anyone could know, I figured it must be a reference to the Glenn Miller song, Pennsylvania 65000.
Yeah, it is indeed. And I was interested because, the Pennsylvania Hotel in Penn Station, it's part of the Pennsylvania, what was the Pennsylvania Phone Exchange in New York. And I'm trying to figure out if the exchange was named after the station or vice versa, but I have not been able to yet. So I will be heading to the Bodleian Library for further research.
All right, one to me then. First question to you is, Hemingway famously became a big hit when he published A Farewell to Arms, which was considered to be the perfect World War I novel. And he still wanted to write the perfect World War II novel, but he didn't, because someone beat him to it. And you could say someone was more in tune with the time of the Second World War. So who was the author, and what was the name of the novel?
Irwin Shaw and the Young Lions.
That is correct. Hemingway was really disappointed when The Young Lions came out because he recognized it was basically the perfect World War II novel. He took it with reasonably good grace. He found out Irwin Shaw's phone number. He called him up, didn't say who it was on the phone, just said, "You wrote a good book, you bastard," and hung up.
That was very Hemingway.
Very
It's
Hemingway-esque.
a fantastic novel. It's one of my favorite novels. It's my second favorite Second World War novel, I think, after the Caine Mutiny. Yeah.
The Caine Mutiny is a great novel, too. They both really capture the essence of the war era in a completely different way. And, of course, they deal with different branches of the service. The Young Lions is definitely an army novel. So,
Irwin Shaw was able to write such a good and accurate novel, partly because, as you know, there was an embargo on soldiers keeping private diaries. I mean, he was a soldier in the Second World War in North Africa and then in Europe, but he wrote very detailed letters back to his brother with instructions that his brother should keep them as sort of a diary for him. So he was able to refer to that after the war. Loopholes.
it's really a brilliant book, one that I should reread. Irwin Shaw was tremendously popular for a brief period. He was a superstar among writers. And
I love Irwin Shaw.
Yeah, I do too, but if you look for his books, they haven't been added to the Library of America collection, which is an incredible oversight. It's hard to find good quality reprints. There are essentially none. You have to buy the originals, and a lot of what's available are shoddy paperbacks. I find it a little hard to understand why he has fallen so completely out of favor. In the late 40s, the 50s, even the 60s, he was really big stuff, and novels like The Young Lion and Lucy Crown are really masterpieces that everyone should read and know.
It's funny. You say people don't read him very much nowadays, which is true. Years ago, when I was an undergraduate, I used to hang out at a deli on Broadway down in the Village. And I was sitting there with a guy I didn't know that well and a few other friends. He was a skateboarder. And it was the beginning of summer. Girls were out in their sundresses at the beginning of the season, and I
Their summer
remarked
dresses.
just to no one, the girls in their summer dresses, and he looked at me and said, "Irwin Shaw, right?" And I was just really surprised because he was, I think he was a professional skateboarder. I didn't realize he was reading Irwin Shaw, but very smart guy. I don't remember his name. Actually, I don't remember anything else about him at all, but from that, I assume he was a smart guy.
Many of us are compelled, or at least when I went to school, we were compelled to read The Girls in Their Summer Dresses, Irwin Shaw's short story, in school. And that is one of his worst efforts, which is really unfortunate. The idea is good, but it's not really
it's
a very
got a
good
great
story.
title.
Exactly. It was a great title, much better than the story itself. And it gives people the wrong view of Irwin Shaw because he was a legitimately great novelist, but it's his novels you should read. So start with The Young Lions if you can handle something having to do with war. Or if you want something that is more along the lines of traditional literary fiction, read Lucy Crown. Okay, it's 1-1. What's your next question to me?
All right. This is a bit of a tough one. I've actually printed out a list so I can mark out your answers. However, I know you know the answer, so we're going to do it anyways. Name 20 Cary Grant movies. And I know
20
that you
Cary
have
Grant
seen
movies.
every movie on the 20 that most likely at least 3 times. So I know you know them. And some of them you've seen literally dozens of times.
I'm going to
So.
start with a genuinely obscure one. Dinner at 8.
Dinner at 8. That's not even on my list.
I figured it wouldn't be, but I want to start with the ones that probably aren't. All right, so the
that's
Philadelphia
one.
Story,
All right. 2,
Charade,
3, 17 to go.
Every Girl Should Be Married,
Yep.
North by Northwest, and there are other Hitchcock movies. So To Catch a Thief.
Good.
There's a third Hitchcock movie.
There are 2 more Hitchcock movies.
Oh yes, Notorious and Suspicion.
Yep, good. I thought you might miss that one.
Then let's see. There is Dream Wife.
Good.
Deborah Carr, great comedy. Mr. Lucky
Yep.
has a really good B-film actress, Lorraine Day, in it. I've always enjoyed that movie. And Cary Grant with a somewhat darker personality since he plays a gangster, albeit a reforming one.
Yeah, it's definitely a somewhat out of character for him, but it's a very good movie. I haven't seen it in a long time.
How am I doing here, by the way?
You're doing well. 8, 9, 10. You're halfway there.
Okay, I've got all the low-hanging fruit then.
No, you've missed all the low-hanging fruit. You've got the high-hanging fruit, actually.
Have I?
I mean, basically, every Saturday of our childhood, we watched a Cary Grant movie. And you've named none of those.
Yes, Bringing Up Baby,
Bringing Up Baby, yep.
Katharine Hepburn.
One of the few movies that I hate every time I watch it. I hate a little more.
I've never really
Bringing Up
liked
Baby.
it either, honestly.
I liked it when I was 3, but every time I watch it,
no,
Katharine Hepburn's
I-
behavior becomes more and more irritating.
I never liked it really, even when I was 3. I always felt that Katharine Hepburn was pretty insufferable. So, I don't know. It was never on the top of my list. Nonetheless, we did watch it a surprising number of times, considering that it seems neither of us really liked it that much.
I think the reason we watch it so often is because we both love fossils and we love big
Cary
dinosaur
Grant also
fossils.
is really funny and great, even in inferior films, which is...
As a matter of fact, everyone in the movie is good except Katharine Hepburn, and it's really not her fault. She was written as the most irritating character.
Yeah, I
in
think the
history.
script is at fault there. It's not my favorite. What else do we have?
You're at 11 so far.
Yes. His Girl Friday.
Yes, one of the very best movies on this list. I think maybe my second favorite Cary Grant movie.
It is a very brilliant film. Dark comedy, surprisingly dark. It feels kind of, in some ways, like a pre-code comedy, even though it really isn't remotely.
That's because it's set in the pre-code years.
It's set in pre-code,
People
but
forget
really-
it's like historical fiction because
It
they
is,
completely ignore that after the first 2 minutes of the movie.
But it's odd, though, because the level of darkness in it for a comedy is really unusual for a post-code, or rather a code-era film.
Yeah, so it's not dark in the sense of being like a horror movie, or even it's not violent in any way. It's dark in the sense of being rather tragic. It's about a man who is guilty and who has been condemned to death, but the ethics of whether or not he should be hanged. And yet it's a comedy and hilarious. So it's a very complex movie. It was a play by Ben Hecht and Charlie McCarthy. Absolutely brilliant.
It is a complex movie. All right, so I've got, a dozen then? I still need a bunch. And you say I'm missing the low-hanging fruit.
You're missing a lot of low-hanging fruit. I also just gave you a hint by saying that His Girl Friday was, I think, my second favorite Cary Grant movie.
Well, I would have thought Philadelphia Story was your first favorite.
It is not. And you know that.
Do I?
Yeah.
But what's your first favorite Cary Grant movie? You can give me another hint. Don't you want to tell me who stars in it or something?
Your job is to name the movies. Mine is to blow them up.
Okay. Thank you. Kiss Them for Me.
Yes. One of the greatest movies ever made. I mean, a lot of these movies are.
We really don't see eye to eye on that one, though. You have always liked it more than...
It was our first viral reel on Instagram. Was a clip from Kiss Them for Me.
That may be. I still
our
never
followers
loved the
have very
film.
good taste. Well,
Anyway,
that's your problem, not its.
let me ask you. The remaining films, they're mostly in black and white, I assume. Any color ones?
They're almost all in color.
Really?
No, that's not true. They're about half and half, actually. I mean, I can start giving you hints. You can give up. There are all sorts of options here.
Not going to give up, obviously. I will stay here all night if necessary, and we'll just edit out the pauses.
This is going to make great listening.
Okay, I need some hints to keep things moving.
All right. These waters are filled with girl-eating sharks.
Oh, Operation Petticoat.
Finally. I thought that would be the first one you'd name.
No, oddly enough, I think of it. Obviously, it's a Cary Grant movie, but I've always kind of thought of it as a Tony Curtis movie.
Yeah, and so do I, apparently, because I went with a Tony Curtis quote instead of a Cary Grant quote, funnily enough.
Indeed, that
it's
was
sort of the
misleading.
only movie where he's basically the straight man. Most of he's the serious captain, and Tony Curtis is the main comedic character.
Yes, I suppose so.
It's a shame he and Tony Curtis didn't, as far as I know, make any other movies together, because they're great together.
How many do we have left to go?
A lot. How many hints do you want? All of them, Dan. How many movies do you have to name? All of them, Dan.
Yes. I'm trying to recall what that is an allusion to. Oh yeah, of course. Father Goose, one
Father
of the
Goose.
greatest films of all time.
Another one of the great... Cary Grant's... I mean, the reason we're doing this with Cary Grant is because I don't think he's like the Beatles of actors. Everything he put out was a #1 hit in quality, not just at the box office.
Had such tremendous range. So we've Father of the Goose. He plays
Father of the Goose.
In Father Goose, he plays a deadbeat, and in Every Girl Should Be Married, he plays a pediatrician. In Mr. Lucky, he plays a gangster. He has tremendous range because he's completely believable in every single role, which is something that very few actors can achieve.
Something that would have taken Father Goose from being almost the greatest movie of all time to possibly the greatest movie of all time is that I believe it was written by the same guy who wrote Charade, and Cary Grant, it was I think a year after Charade, Cary Grant wanted Audrey Hepburn to play the lead, and the studio turned him down for whatever reason.
Why? They got Leslie Caron instead, who was very good in the part, but gosh, that's a
I've never been a
missed
big Leslie
opportunity.
Caron fan, probably because I
read her memoirs.
Yeah, and that sort of ruined her for me. I
Did
was
it?
more of a fan before I read about her actual life.
Why? Why was that?
It was her remarks about the German occupation of France during the war.
Really?
Yeah, it was. It's a little unfair for me to try to quote them because I read this years ago. But basically, she said, "Oh, one day all of the Jewish families just left, and there were all these nice apartments that we had as options to move into." And I was like, "What the hell is wrong with you? How could you say it like that?" I was shocked and kind of mad.
In some respects, at least, it's more honest, since that was basically the French attitude.
Yes, she is an accurate portrayal of, so far as we can tell, the general Parisian attitude towards the deportation of their friends and neighbors.
Another
We just
hint, if you
watched
please.
Thunderball. What was the glove that that Sean Connery carries around with him made out of?
Touch of Mink. I would never have
Touch
thought
of
of that
Mink.
film, though, because it's not very good.
Yeah, that's the worst one on this list. Actually, I think it's the only one on this list that I don't like besides Bringing Up Baby.
But is that the only Cary Grant film with Doris Day?
I think so.
Can't think of any other off the top of my head, certainly.
But think of some of the other leading ladies he acted with, because you've missed a lot of his favorites.
Oh! Myrna Loy, obviously. Bachelor and the Bobby Soxer.
Very good.
And Mr. Blandings Builds His Dream House. I don't know how I could not have thought of Myrna Loy.
Yep.
Are there other Myrna Loy movies on the list?
Nope.
Okay, so we've got those two. And how do we stand now?
16, 17, 18, only 2 more. And you still missed some big ones.
Only 2 more.
Only
Well,
2 more.
Give me some ideas here.
I've never felt sorry for an admiral before.
Oh. What is the name of this movie? Anne Sheridan. It has Anne Sheridan in it. It's I Was a Male Warbird.
Yes, 19, only 1 more to go.
That one I certainly haven't seen in quite a while.
The funny thing is, I think the #1 leading lady that Cary ever worked with, you haven't mentioned.
The #1 leading lady.
Just in terms of Cary Grant chemistry.
Well, Katharine Hepburn was probably the most famous.
Not Katharine Hepburn.
We already done Audrey Hepburn, so that's the Hepburns covered. I think he has great chemistry with Myrna Loy. Wish they'd made more
He does.
movies. But
She would
Myrna Loy is wonderful and has great chemistry with everyone, with Clark Gable too. Okay. Well, just tell me the leading lady. I can come up with the film.
She was in Roberta.
Oh, yes, My Favorite Wife, and that should be 20. But there is
No,
another.
I think that's 19, and there's another one with Irene Dunn in it.
There is. I mean, I know it
That
happens
is 20.
in the
So
movie.
you've got it. I'll just tell you. It's The Awful Truth.
The Awful Truth. Okay.
Good work.
Sort of good work. I don't know. Do you really want to give that to me? You had to drop several hints to me. I don't know.
No.
I didn't think of Irene
Well,
Dunne
since the
until
original
end.
question was just going to be to name 10, I'm going to give it to you. Movies that you left out: The Talk of the Town,
Oh yes, of course.
Monkey Business, Arsenic and
Oh,
Old
yeah.
Lace, Holiday, which kind of sucks, and Walk and Don't Run. Walk, Don't Run. I mean, these are just the ones on my list. Obviously, there are other Cary Grant movies that I did.
Well, I was
down.
thinking of Walk Don't Run, and I couldn't recall the title, so I didn't.
Yeah,
bother
I would like
trying.
to see that again. That's the only one on this list that I've only seen once.
That's
and
how
I
bad
feel
it
like I
was.
should get. Well, no, I never have to get around to watching it again, and that was 20 years ago, and I think I should give it another chance.
I think we objected to seeing Carrie and non the romantic lead, and yes, why not object to that? It's still objectionable. He should always be the romantic lead. Okay, that was a long question. I'm moving on to the next question to you. So my next question to you is: in the Gallipoli campaign in the First World War, which was Winston Churchill's idea, his idea was to force the Dardanelles not to have a land fight. However, over the ensuing fight, which actually really wasn't his fault, but rather the fault of the admiral in command, whose name was Roebuck, I think, who hit a mine, or his ships hit a series of mines, and he retired rather than pressing through. That is not the question. The question is, who was the first Sea Lord who forced Winston Churchill's resignation by resigning himself?
I was just reading about Gallipoli the other day. And
His middle name was Arbuthnot.
I named a cat Arbuthnot once. Stray
That
cat.
was this gentleman's
was
middle name.
Was it Robinson?
No.
Was it Robertson?
It's a name shared by a chess champion.
Fisher.
That's correct.
Okay.
He was John Arbuthnot Jackie Fisher, or Lord Jackie Fisher. And he was himself a little bit insane, in fact. And so actually having read... Churchill wrote him a very nice letter asking him not to resign. They had tactical differences over which Churchill was almost certainly correct. Nonetheless, Fisher was extremely indignant. He wanted to resign. Churchill wrote him a very nice letter asking him not to. And Fisher forwarded this letter along with a notation that he'd rejected the 30 pieces of silver to the prime minister. But the prime minister, I think, was asked with reviewing the letter, concluded that Fisher was in fact the insane one. Nonetheless, this led to Churchill's retirement from politics for a while. I mean, he remained in politics, but as a backbencher. So once he was out of the cabinet, he thought his political career might be over, and he describes this as the wilderness years. And
Well,
it's a reasonable...
He didn't go to the back benches. He went to the front lines of the First World War. He commanded men in battle, I believe.
That is true, too. He got a commission, I believe, as a colonel in an infantry regiment, and he was famous for his courage under fire, legendarily courageous. But then in the interwar years, he was in a political wilderness or no man's land, and he thought this might be the end of his political career because famously it had been the end of his father's political career. His father had been considered to be a shoo-in to be the next prime minister, and that is Lord Randolph. And when he resigned in protest, when he was Lord of the Exchequer, he thought this was going to actually be a boost and it would cause the government to fall, or at least cause the prime minister to have to resign, and he would become the new prime minister. Instead, he was never on the government benches again, and that was the end of him. So Churchill obviously feared that this was essentially reprising the disastrous end of his father's career. And that didn't turn out to be the case, but it took many, many years before he would again be invited to be part of the government, not until the Hitler menace was already firmly entrenched. Anyways, I'll give you that because you did get the name Fisher.
I don't know if that should count, especially because I was just reading about this and I should have known that. And I feel like there was someone in a similar position whose name was Richardson or...
It doesn't matter. We're going to give it to you anyway because I'm feeling generous today. So what is the third question to me?
All right. Name 5 Venetian islands that are not directly connected to the main city.
Oh, that's an interesting one. Murano, Torcello, Judaica or something like that.
Very
Giudecca.
close.
Giudecca. I can't remember the name of the funerary island.
It is the cemetery. It's San
Cimetiero.
I'll give you that because the funerary island is basically what it's called. So that's 4, and you've left out one that you have visited many times.
Well, I said Torcello.
Yeah.
Said Murano. The Lido.
The Lido, that's 5. But there's still one more that I know because I've been there with you multiple times.
Which one is it?
Burano.
Burano, of course.
Yeah.
A beautiful island and underrated. Not that we want people to start visiting it.
Yes, the most underrated one, by the way, is Torcello. It sucks. You should never, ever go there.
Yes, don't even mention that. But
Yeah.
Burano has a very pretty collection of houses that have actually almost a Spanish flavor to them with their bright colors. It's really a beautiful little place, which is famous for not its glass, which is Murano, but its lace making and it's lace making and linens. It's really a lovely little island and definitely worth a visit. Okay, so my third question to you is, what is the name of the B-29 that dropped the atomic bomb on Nagasaki? The second
Boxcar.
atomic bomb. Boxcar, that is correct. All right, we're tied 3-3, which means that we need a tiebreaker
We're kind
question.
of tied 2.5 to 2.5, but yes, I guess we do need a tiebreaker question.
Tiebreaker question, please.
All right. This is a good one. I'm excited about this one.
Are you?
On a square-rigged ship, so starting from the bottom of, say, the foresail, the foremast, you've got your foresail, your topsail, your topgallant, your royal, and then there are 2 more sails above that if you're going for the absolute total rigging. What comes above the royal? And
I believe it's the skysail
Yep.
and
That's
the
one.
moonsail.
Yes, but what is the other name for the moonsail?
Does there have
You've
to be
already got
another-
the question. There is another name, and it's a better name.
the skyscraper.
The skyscraper, I think is another name for the skysail. But no, it's the moonraker.
The moonraker.
Yeah. However,
skyscraper
that
and
is
the
a
moonraker.
correct answer.
All right, very good.
Yeah. Good work. I'm impressed.
Who is the man who discovered the structure of DNA along with James Watson?
Crick.
That's correct. And I have no further gloss on that, except that he didn't get an IBM lab named after him, which is a bit of a shame. All right, so we need further tiebreaker questions, and this is dangerous because I'm running out of questions here.
What was E.B. White's real name? That is full name. What do E and B stand for?
Edwin? No. Oh, bother.
But at this rate, we're not going to get to James Bond at all. It's just going to be a full hour of trivia.
Elwyn?
Yes. Very good. But and the B?
No idea.
Come on. You've
Elwyn
read
Bixby
so much.
White.
Yeah, that's what I always think of too. No, it was Elwyn Brooks White. I'm afraid that's a fail.
Elwyn Brooks White.
Yeah.
All right. What American...
Considering how much E.B. White you've read, you should have known that.
I just always thought of him as EB.
Okay, well, you know what? I'll give you a mulligan. What was his nickname? What did everyone call him?
It was a nickname that he picked up at Cornell.
Yes.
Everyone called Cornell guys who were named Elwyn by this nickname, and I can't remember what it is.
I haven't looked this up because this is a spontaneous thing, but I'm almost certain it was Andy. I think everyone called him
I think
Andy
you're
White.
right. I think you're right. All right. Well, here's
fail.
a question that you can answer correctly to win this round, which is, what American car gave its name to an expression for complexity or sophistication or just all-around excellence?
Cadillac?
No, there was an expression in the English vernacular which you're quite familiar with, which was used to indicate just the top level or the best level or
I mean that the Cadillac.
Net Plus Ultra.
They're literally taxes on Cadillac plans of
It's Duesenberg.
healthcare. Oh, well, yeah, okay. I was still explaining my own answer. If you'd given me a second, a doozy,
Yes.
I would have gotten there. Maybe.
All right. Well,
All right, so we're tied again.
we're tied again. Come up with another tie-breaking answer.
All right. What was the original name of the Eroica Symphony?
The Napoleon Symphony. The Emperor
Wrong.
Symphony.
Also wrong.
The
Thinking of the Emperor Concerto.
the
I mean, Napoleon is very close.
yeah, it's not the Bonaparte Symphony.
Yes, exactly. The Symphonia of Bonaparte. And you can actually see the very page which Beethoven scratched out the name after Napoleon declared himself emperor. he said, Napoleon is just a mortal man like any other and will too tread upon the rights of man, something like that. And he crossed out the name, tore up the title sheet, and renamed it Eroica.
All right,
dedicated to the memory of a great man.
We'll stick with Beethoven. In what key is Beethoven's Opus 131 string quartet?
C minor.
Nope, C sharp minor. You lose, and that is the end. And that is the end of the Museum of Everything pub trivia. Sorry, that might have been slightly arcane. However, everyone should know Opus 131, the string quartet, with 7 movements. The last movement of which is absolutely one of the most exciting pieces of music ever written. Listen to the live recording by the Alban Berg String Quartet.
An accidental loss.
In any event, let's move on to the actual subject at hand.
That was hilarious. That was very sophisticated musical humor right there. That just right over the head of my co-host.
I guess it did. Care to explain
Accidental
it?
loss, a C sharp minor, and accidental. Is that?
Oh, forget it. Very funny.
Cut this out so
very
you don't
funny.
look like an idiot.
I don't think that is the person who's going to look like an idiot. But in any event, let's move on to the actual subject at hand. Now we can finally get to our top 5 James Bond films of all time. This is the very exciting part of the list. I have been waiting to get the top 5 through the previous 3 episodes where we have ranked all the James Bond films, starting with the worst, and the worst was a bit of tough going. But now we are at the 5 best James Bond films ever made, and they are all genuinely fantastic. It was a little bit... I think the 5th one is clearly in 5th place, but after that, we've had trouble ranking the top 4 consistently because they're all so good. And so calling one 4th rather than 3rd place, there's not too much distinction at the very top of the list. The great films are all really, really great. But let's start off with number 5.
There goes the concept of this being a definitive list.
Don't say that. It's still definitive. Anyways, let's go ahead with number 5, which is The Living Daylights, Timothy Dalton. And this one probably will surprise some people. I don't think that it is near the top of most people's list, but it really should be. It's an absolutely fantastic movie. Timothy Dalton is funny, solid, like gritty, but not too gritty. It's a thrilling movie, really extremely well-paced, well thought out. All the comic elements are perfect and work together. It's an exciting concept that's not repeated from previous James Bond movies, so new IP territory. Just works really well. It's a fantastic movie, one of the ones that we enjoy watching over and over again.
Great performances from everyone involved, really good action, just enough James Bond silliness and like the Q scenes and the car chases to be fun without going overboard into Roger Moore territory, and very grounded tone to a lot of the movie that just it gives it the sort of the gritty feel of From Russia with Love.
Great music
a
too.
Return to form. A great music. Aha sings the theme song, but it was written by John Barry, I believe. So
there are elements of
beautiful
this film...
car, by the way, V8 Vantage.
Absolutely. That is a car that has become tremendously expensive recently and hard to get one's hands on.
I saw one on the road not too long ago, and I followed it for like 25 minutes before I was finally like, this is weird. I should stop following.
Just a staggeringly good-looking car.
Yeah.
James May, in one of the early seasons of Top Gear, which I haven't seen this episode in a long time, but he did a really good little segment on the Aston Martin V8 Vantage and why it was such a manly British-style car. And I think he described it as the car that in a loud pub is, as everyone is bragging, is the car that's sitting quietly in the corner of the room, enjoying its pint of bitter, and then just has finally had enough and takes everyone outside and gives them a damn good thrashing. In any event, because it was actually faster than the Ferrari you could buy at the time. It's a really, really great car, though. The styling is...
It's kind of the British imitation of a fastback Mustang. But it comes off so perfectly that it's a masterpiece, and you don't see them very often. I saw one in Connecticut. I saw one in Long Island once. Both times, very excited. I would love one of these.
The grill shape of the Aston Martin is the most beautiful thing you can put on a car if you do it right, and the worst if you do it wrong. Like with the Aston Martin,
the newest Vantage.
Yes, the newest Vantage or the DB12. What is
the DB11? Is
I was thinking of the
hideous,
177, the like.
Oh yeah.
That special edition car they did, which was absolutely awful.
7.
Whatever it is really
707.
it's one of the most
whatever it
hideous
is,
cars.
it sucks. Yeah.
One of the most hideous cars we've ever seen. However, when they do it really right, like the DB9, the original AM V8 Vantage, obviously the DB5, the DB6, it's a really beautiful look.
The second generation Vantage, which came out during the DB9 era, also the first generation Vanquish, beautiful car. And the second generation Vanquish, which is basically a DB9 with a slightly more vulgar spoiler, also a beautiful car.
I really like the Ice Lake scene with the AM V8 Vantage where they give the car.
Well, you
like,
keep calling it
ski
the
outriggers.
AM V8 Vantage. AM in AM V8 Vantage stands for Aston Martin.
Yes, I know, but people usually call it the AM V8. The ice scene on the lake where it has these outrigger skis and the spiky tires that just sort of wind out of the tires when the center wheel lock rotates is really a cool feature. The whole scene is really well done.
Yeah, it's the when he's trying to hide the fact that the car has Q gadgets from the girl he's helping escape from the Eastern Bloc.
It's a nice update to a lot of Q gadgets. And then after that, when they escape together on the cello case, after the V8 Vantage sort of gets stuck in a snowdrift and he sets it to explode, James Bond and his co-star escape on the cello case because she's supposed to be a cellist with a famous cello Stradivarius, which she needs to take with her. So they open up the cello case and they slide down the hill on it, which is actually a really fun scene. He appears to be steering the cello case sled using the cello itself, scraping it into the snow on one side or the other. But in reality, that didn't work. And so the prop department had to build a steerable sled cello case, which had a little control, which the girl, Miriam Dabo is the name of the actress, operated secretly. One of her hands is on this little steering thing that they built into the cello case prop. And so she's actually the one who's guiding them down the hill. It's a really fun scene with a fun ending and really creative as well.
It was a real return to form after A View to a Kill, and the late Roger Moore movies in general were not tremendous successes by and large, but it's a fantastic movie, and a great title, Living Daylights, taken from an Ian Fleming short story. The entire opening scene of the
What is the opening scene?
Well, there's the opening scene at Gibraltar. That's not what I'm talking about. The opening scene of the movie proper, when James Bond is serving as a sniper with that really cool, very strange Walter sniper rifle that is so rare now. I've never even seen one.
Is that the P2000?
No, it's something like, I think it's a W2000, something like that.
That is an amazingly cool sniper rifle. It's not very accurate by modern standards. Ian McCullen on Forgotten Weapons did a great video on it, incidentally. He's one of our favorite YouTubers.
It was as accurate as an SVD Drogonov, but he said it was a lot easier to shoot accurately than Drogonov.
In any event,
that scene is the entirety of the story. The short story, The Living Daylights.
There's just
which
a lot
ends with the great line, must have scared the living daylights out of her.
There are a lot of cool touches in this movie, all the devices that they come up with, not just the car, the idea of smuggling a Russian defector out of Eastern Germany by using a pipeline, essentially with a little pod that gets pressurized and shot through a gas pipe. I mean, there are a lot of cool ideas like that. And then it ends up being an entirely realistic bad guy scenario where it's really over drug smuggling and diamonds and so forth, as opposed to a guy wanting to blow up the world, which is the reason I think it's particularly palatable. And we defeat the Russians in Afghanistan with the help of the Mujahideen, which is, in any event.
That part may have aged slightly less well than other features, but I mean, the guys who played the Mujahideen in the movie are really amusing. They're very good.
They are.
And then when they show up at, the Royal Albert Hall at the end, that's also pretty amusing. But the great thing about this movie is it was completely before CGI, and there's some very dramatic stunts in it that are all real. I mean, there are two guys dangling out the back of a C-130?
Yeah, the cargo plane scene.
Yeah, some netting hanging out the back of a cargo plane, and it's all completely real.
Where James Bond is having a fight with sort of the villain's arch henchman, and this cargo plane is stuffed with bags of opium, and the cargo net with all these bags in it goes out of the plane as it's in flight, and they have to have this fight on the cargo net, which is a creative idea. And yes, done by real stuntmen crawling around. As the fight ends, the James Bond character has ended it by cutting open the cargo net. All the bags fly away. And so the James Bond stuntman was left on an empty cargo net. And apparently they had to give a lot of work. That plane had to be flying very fast to make this fly at all because it was so heavy with all those bags in it. Once the bags were gone, the cargo net began flopping around uncontrollably. And the idea was that James Bond would just climb back into the airplane, but he couldn't. And so actually you can see this in the movie. The net begins to flop around uncontrollably, and the stuntman just can't get back inside the airplane. So he ended up having to let go and use the emergency parachute, which was packed very, very tight, very small, under his costume.
Yeah, and this was what made movies great before CGI, because when guys are doing super dangerous things for stunts, they're actually doing them. And that just makes it more exciting. I mean, it's like watching... I don't know. It's like watching bullfighting. You know that no matter how safe they make other sports, if you fight bulls, you might still get gored and killed.
It is,
and it's not because anyone wants to see someone gets killed, but it's impressive seeing
people do genuinely dangerous things.
Yeah, courage. Yeah. Courage is a very compelling thing.
Yeah, so a genuinely great movie, and very different from the other movies at the very top of our list, because I would say this is one it's not like a Sean Connery James Bond movie, but it's still completely satisfactory, hugely entertaining as a thriller, as an exciting action film. I really love this film and can watch it any number of times.
Me too. And it goes very well with the somewhat darker but still very Timothy Dalton-ish sequel, License to Kill, which we did already. And that's maybe Timothy Dalton is my second favorite James Bond after Sean Connery, just because those two movies are great and he's great in them. He's
really good, because if you think of James Bond as being a quietly manly, extremely capable, dryly amusing, and still somewhat gentlemanly character, I mean, all of those elements blend together really well in Timothy Dalton. Oh, yeah, he is an extremely good Bond. License to Kill was number 10 on our list. Living Daylight's number 5, and I think very comfortable there. All right, so number 4 on our list, and now we get to the core.
To peak James Bond.
The original 4 films, but we don't have them in original 4 order. We actually ended up ranking these exactly the same. Number 4 on our list is Dr. No, the original James Bond film, which is still figuring things out. It was made on a relatively, especially compared to the later films, a relatively limited budget. It doesn't have all of the James Bond ideas in place yet. It doesn't have Q, but it's still a fantastically wonderful movie, and it introduces a lot of things that would come back again and again. Especially, of course, James Bond being played by Sean Connery. This is his first outing, and the creation of the character.
Yeah, it's a very sort of straightforward 60s spy story, but just better in every way than your average 60s spy story, and that's what made it so enduringly great and launched the whole franchise.
They managed to do so much with relatively little. I mean, for example, the scenes that you remember as scary or exciting, like when James Bond wakes up with a tarantula in his bed, don't take a lot in terms of, props or certainly expensive setups in order to manage, and yet they're really exciting. And the sets, even though they are also set up without apparently too much expenditure, are extremely effective. So I'm thinking of the little room where the doctor goes to pick up the tarantula, which he's going to leave in James Bond's room. That basically is an empty room with a small raised circular platform and a chair on it, and the shadows and a shadow. The shadow is definitely copied from Hitchcock's use of shadows. It's sort of like a grid bar shadow. Just that shadow makes an ordinary room feel so, I don't know, spooky in a way. It's extraordinarily effective set design.
This was designed along with all the other sets, and all of the sets for most of the first, 15 James Bond movies, designed by Ken Adam, who I believe, I would have to check this out because I'm shooting from the hip here, but as I recall, he was a refugee from Germany during the Second World War. He was Jewish, and then joined the RAF and was a distinguished fighter pilot during the war before going into set design after the war. So sort of like Desmond Llewellyn, who was, sent to Colditz because he was trying to escape from prisoner of war camps. I mean, it's interesting that these movies were made by teams of artists, so many of whom were veterans of the Second World War. In a way, it was a glorious time for Britain.
Not surprising, also in its way. The other set that really strikes me is, well, actually everything having to do with Dr. No's lair. Generally speaking, when they got to lairs in You Only Live Twice, they went completely overboard. They spent a huge amount of money on it, relatively speaking, but the results were actually much less impressive, even though it was in a giant hollowed out volcano. Here, he's simply sort of in a bunker situation, but the design is really creative, even beautiful at points. The way they use different materials, the big slabs of copper and so forth. And then, of course, the control center where Dr. No is trying to topple over American and British missiles using some sort of radar interference technology. That control room, which is supposed to have a little nuclear reactor in it and a pool of water, is a beautiful set design, which is really intriguing and fun to watch. And the final showdown happens there, and it's a very exciting space.
Yeah, it's somewhat confusing because it's not clear why there would be an air duct that led directly from James Bond's prison cell to the nuclear reactor room. In the novel, it's supposed to be an intentional obstacle course because Dr. No has this psychological angle where he likes to test the strength and resilience of his prisoners to see how far through this obstacle course they can make. That was dropped from the movie just because there wasn't time for it.
Well, that's why they make fun of this in the movie Top Secret, which is basically a spoof on all sorts of films, including...
I forgot about that. They do make fun of this, which is very funny. Yeah, I love Top Secret. Val Kilmer, great movie if you hadn't seen it.
It is a great film, and it has this funny scene where he's in an East German prison. He tries to get out by crawling through the ducts, and he ends up always back where he started. In any event, is there anything else we have to say about Dr. No? I mean, it was the first as that famous. It set the idea not just of James Bond, but of Bond girls, because you have Ursula Andress coming out of the water in her bikini. We didn't think she was the best Bond girl, at least growing up, but the fact is that was an iconic moment, and her Bond on the beach, Sean Connery, Ursula Andress, sort of set the tone for the entire franchise to come.
Yep. It had the original Felix Leiter, who, if you've watched a lot of James Bond movies, and if you're listening to this, I assume you have, you know that Felix is replaced in almost every movie. That wasn't originally the plan. They wanted to bring him back for the next Felix appearance in Goldfinger, but he demanded a huge raise, his own movies, and equal billing with Sean Connery.
I think that was his agent's fault.
It could be.
His agent tried to overreach there a little bit and got him written out. So
yeah, which is a shame because he was good. He wasn't as good as Rick Van Nutter in Thunderball, but he was a good.
He was really well cast, I thought.
Yeah, and then there's Quarrel, James Bond's Caribbean partner, sort of the Caribbean on-site MI6 guy, which became a theme through all the movies. And you had Karen Bay in Turkey and From Russia with Love and Pinder in
I always thought there was
Thunderball.
Something scary about his demise in this movie, though.
Well, there is, but part of the thing that makes his demise so sad is because by that point in the movie, you really like him. And one of the unfortunate things is that since this was the first movie but not the first novel, he appears in some of the other novels and consequently had to be written out of the movies because he was dead. Which is a shame. They have his son, Quarrel Jr., in Live and Let Die when it was supposed to be Quarrel himself. But in any event.
Also the introduction of the James Bond theme, which we hear for the first time in this movie, although it's not actually the theme song entire in the introductory sequence, which has a more Caribbean flavor and then goes into Three Blind Mice.
Yeah, they didn't work out the idea of an opening scene and then the credit song and then the rest of the movie until From Russia with Love. But they established so much in this movie of what would make the franchise so great. The gun barrel scene begins in this movie. That begins the movies.
But also then the opening scene would, in a traditional James Bond movie, have been put before the credits, but it still is sort of an opening scene that sets up the rest of the movie, but isn't contiguous exactly, where they have a secret listening station in the Bahamas that's being operated by this secret agent who gets shot by these assassins who pretend to be blind beggars walking on the street. They show up and they kill her, and they kill her boss Strangways. And it's really to find this missing agent in the Caribbean that did I say the Bahamas before? I meant the Caribbean.
Yeah, well, it's not exactly clear whether this island is part of the Bahamas or not. It is in the Caribbean, so
in any event, it's in order to find that missing agent that James Bond is tasked to go down.
It starts on Nassau, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think
it's
it does.
Jamaica. I think it's Jamaica. So it's not part of the
In any
Bahamas,
event, it's one of James Bond's favorite places to be in the world, which I think is because it was one of Ian Fleming's favorite places to be in the world.
Yeah, well, so that's where Ian Fleming lived at least part of the year and wrote, was on his house on Jamaica, Goldeneye. And interestingly, while he was writing the James Bond novels, our grandfather lived just a few 100 yards away on the North Beach of Jamaica where he was researching sharks. And given the fact that Jamaica is not a very big island and did not have a very big population, and the fact that both our grandfather and Ian Fleming were veterans of the Second World War, and our grandfather was an oceanographer, and Ian Fleming was obsessed with oceanography. They must have known each other. Now, our grandfather had a penchant for meeting famous people and not realizing they were famous. He did this a few times in his life. But they must have run into each other because they lived so close and had so many shared interests.
Certainly a reasonable thesis. But I don't think I don't think he's a recognizable character in any of the films, which is too bad.
No, but basically that beach where our grandfather lived and where Ian Fleming worked in his house Goldeneye was where they shot the movie. The remarkable waterfall and that inland stream that they hide in are now, I think, part of a Jamaican national park. But that's basically the same place where the novels were written, which is an interesting detail.
Yes, this is an example of how you can make a fantastic movie without spending too much money, relatively speaking. I mean, it wasn't a super cheap movie, but it was very super cheap compared to the movies that followed. And in many respects, it's better. Certainly, it's the original. And this is a movie that we've watched, I don't know how many times, a dozen or more, easily.
More than that. You know, it introduces James Bond playing Chemin de Fer, Baccarat, in a casino, in his tux, smoking his cigarette, and it introduces the idea of suave British spy going to exotic foreign locations that used to be part of the British Empire, or at that time were still part of the British Empire, I guess. So it's got all the ingredients for the later movies, and maybe it doesn't do them quite as well as the Sean Connery movies that directly follow it, but it's very close.
Actually, there's one other thing worth mentioning, which is I think this does bad guys really well also because Dr. No is a really good character. The resentment that he feels over a series of events resolves itself into a truly menacing and yet understandable scheme, as opposed to, in the modern movie Spectre, the ridiculous idea that Blofeld is just angry at James Bond because he's pissed off at him from when they were children, which is just such a stupid idea by comparison.
They try to hire James Bond.
Yes, Dr. No has been rejected by the Western powers. He is a gifted nuclear scientist. He's offered his services to them. They rejected him. And so he says, all right, fine, I'm going to do my own thing and you're going to suffer for it. And in the course of his operations, he tries to hire James Bond, or he says, this is a great scene, by the way, where Dr. No and James Bond are having their meal together in the subaquatic hideout. And Dr. No says, you were different. You cost me time, money. I even thought there might be a place for you in Spectre. But then he says, I was wrong. You're just a stupid policeman whose luck has run out. And I thought that was always a really good scene and really well written.
Yeah.
So if you haven't seen it, and I can't imagine that you haven't, but you need to, one of the greatest Bond films of all time, and it's number 4 on our list. So shall we move on to number 3? The third greatest Bond film of all time is Goldfinger. What a masterpiece.
Yeah, and I don't know. Sometimes I think it should be at the top of the list, or at least number 2. We just go back and forth so much.
The reason I don't think it can be absolutely at the top of the list is because the actress who plays the Bond girl, whose name is Blackwell, Honor Blackman. I just never really liked her very much. Honestly, I think that she is a kind of downer in the movie, and I don't think it's just the way her
but she's supposed
written.
to be, because she introduces the trope, now very common in spy movies, of the bad girl becoming a good girl through the strength of charm of Sean Connery.
Yes, but I just that is the part of the film that I didn't like as much. But I love everything else about it. This is the film that introduces Q properly. We have seen him in the previous movie, From Russia with Love, but introduced as Major Boothroyd. This is the first time he appears on screen as Q, and these are the first time we get a proper Q scene, including the Aston Martin, the DB5, the original, with its machine guns behind the headlights and its bulletproof screen and its ability to drop spikes that blow up people's tires and oil slicks and stuff. The cool original Aston Martin DB5 comes from this film.
It's the first time we see Q's lab. And From Russia with Love, he gives James Bond the briefcase with, the sniper rifle and the knife and the coins and so forth. But this is the first time we see the Quartermaster's lab, the Q lab, and it stands out as one of the truly great moments in cinema history. And of course, maybe the most famous scene in all of movies is the girl painted gold. I wonder.
And I think we have it from one of the producers of the film, or possibly the director, that he said he did actually use the rotating license plates to get out of a ticket. So it's possible that some of James Bond gadgets were actually useful in real life.
I find that
in any event, Aston Martin wasn't too keen on being featured in the film. It may sound insane now, but when they were looking for cars for the film, they wanted to have it be a DB5. Aston Martin had been suggested to Ian Fleming as replacement for the Bentley. During the phase when Ian Fleming was still writing the novels, one of his readers said he didn't think the Bentley was particularly the best choice of car, and he suggested an Aston Martin instead, which back then was an earlier model of Aston Martin. They wanted to use the Aston Martin in the film, and so they wrote to Aston and said, have you heard of James Bond? And they said, no, we haven't. I mean, at this point, 2 films had come out, but they were huge hits. A little surprising that Aston Martin hadn't heard of the James Bond, blossoming franchise, but they refused to give them a car. They did agree to sell them a car at full retail price, and they ended up having to buy 3 of them in order to make the stunt cars for the film. So it ended up being quite an expensive undertaking that almost didn't happen, in which case James Bond would have been driving a Jaguar E-Type instead, which would have made the E-Type even more unobtainable. So I suppose it's lucky that things worked out the way they did. Certainly the DB5 was a fantastic choice.
Aston Martin would be out of business if that hadn't happened.
That's definitely true. This 100% saved Aston Martin because there are so many other fine British coach builders and car makers who simply didn't last. And so many that have lasted such changed forms that they don't really count. Triumph still makes motorcycles today. They don't really make cars. They are out of business. Lotus is in business, but it died and had to come back. Jaguar...
It died again.
And it died again.
I think it's back to being out of business.
And Jaguar is always close to dying, and certainly only survives on the strength of the E-Type. I mean, well, they're smaller manufacturers without number. But yes, Aston Martin would not exist today if not for James Bond, and it's lucky that the producers wanted so much to have Aston Martins in the film. Otherwise, Aston Martin would be toast. But the plot of the movie is also really good because it's, again, when we're at the solid top of the list, one of the things that makes these movies good is that the bad guy is not trying to destroy the world or get back at James Bond or do something just stupid and ridiculous that makes no sense. Generally speaking, the villains at this point simply want to make a lot of money, which is much more understandable, but they're willing to do it on a huge scale and sacrifice many lives in the process. And so Goldfinger's idea is he wants to break into Fort Knox, which has most of our gold in it, and not steal any, but just irradiate it with essentially a dirty bomb that will make it impossible for anyone to use that gold for a very long time. And as a result, his own gold holdings will skyrocket in value. That seems to be a very reasonable plan to me.
Yeah, it's the reason it's the best bad guy plot is because not only does it make sense, all of the best ones have bad guy plots that make sense, but this one is actually genuinely very clever. The idea of irradiating the gold, not stealing it, but just irradiating it so it can't be used or touched, and consequently dramatically increasing the value of his own gold holdings. I mean, it's a brilliant idea.
It is a brilliant idea. The bad guy, Goldfinger, what's the name of the actor who plays Goldfinger?
Kurt Froba, I think.
Yeah, you should know this off the top of your head, just because I don't, but also should. We have seen him in another movie, The Longest Day, where he plays an incredibly minor part.
So does Sean Connery. And so does the bad guy from The Spy Who Loved Me.
True.
They are all in The Longest Day.
Yes, very true. When Kurt Froba showed up for this film, they were surprised to find out that he didn't speak any English, and so
that is not entirely true.
Well, they reported as that. So I guess
they say that on the special edition DVD documentary, but I've looked into it further, and in fact, he did speak English. He had quite a thick accent, but part of his original voice is actually still in the movie. There's a scene where James Bond sticks his head up through a model of Fort Knox so he can overhear the plan, and they didn't dub that, so you can hear Kurt Froba's original voice. And his accent is thick, but it's not impossible to understand. And in fact, it has a slightly more menacing quality. I think his original voice is actually in the original trailer for the movie, too.
But the point is that the voice that you're hearing of Goldfinger for most of the movie is not his own. It was dubbed.
Right.
And they have kind of a history of doing this in the franchise, which I didn't realize until I was rewatching For Your Eyes Only a couple of weekends ago, and there was something a little bit strange to me about the way the lady lead in that movie was saying her lines, and it turns out that she's dubbed as well. She's actually a French actress, and they thought her accent was too thick. And so not only could she not go underwater, even though that was the main point of the movie, they didn't let her use her own voice. That is a real shame because I've seen some outtakes that where she's speaking with her real voice, and it's very dramatic. I think it would have been a vast improvement to let her speak in her real voice. Probably for Kurt Froba and Goldfinger also, although the
Yeah,
voiceover
he
works
sounds
well.
a little more menacing with his real voice.
I like the voiceover too, though. He is one of the great Bond villains of all time. And
He is sort of the quintessential Bond villain.
the scene in which he explains his plot to all of these criminals who have come together to help make his master plan work by delivering various bits and bobs to him. Then, of course, he exterminates them all. And separately, we have Oddjob, the best henchman of all time, or at least the most memorable.
It invents the idea of having a James Bond
Henchman with a special thing.
With a special thing, exactly.
And so Oddjob's special
this
thing
is still really the best one, except maybe for Jaws's teeth. This is the
best one. Oddjob's special thing is throwing a hat with a metal disc in the rim, which he can throw with such force and accuracy that it kills people by breaking their necks. Rather fanciful, but I don't know. It really does work. And you, especially watching this movie as a young kid, you feel exactly how menacing Oddjob is. This gigantic guy with his dangerous bowler hat, walking around always at the shoulder of Goldfinger and ready to be his enforcer. This really did create that idea in the subsequent franchises because it doesn't exist as such in the first two movies, in either Dr. No or From Russia with Love, where there are plenty of bad guys, but there's
Red
not...
Grant is sort of the beginning of this character.
I would say not really, though, because Red Grant is simply an assassin, like a top-quality assassin doing his own mission. He's a completely independent character. This guy is strictly a henchman, and so Oddjob is inventing the idea of the chief villain needs a great henchman to go along with him, which is a fact of James Bond movies. And you saw it here first.
I wonder how fanciful. I wonder how fanciful the hat thing really is, because if someone took a piece of iron, a blunt piece of iron, and hit you in the neck really hard with it, it might well break your neck. Certainly,
I really doubt that you could frisbee throw something fast enough to do that.
I mean, if you were Oddjob levels,
but we know that boomerangs can be lethal at least to certain animals. So I suppose that it's not completely inconceivable.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's necessarily realistic. I'm just saying I wonder, and maybe we should test that at the Museum of Everything to see if it's possible.
I also think this is the only big set piece fight at the end of a movie that I really love. There's some that I like, but I love this one. Thunderball is actually on the fence. We'll have to talk about that. But generally speaking, as I've said, I don't like really big set piece fights at the end of movies because you know exactly where the movie's going at that point, and so it feels like it's already over, and my brain sort of switches off. But here, they didn't have access to the real Fort Knox. They recreated their own interior, and they did a fantastic job. This is another one of the best movie sets ever. And so,
is it the best movie set ever?
It might be the best movie set ever. And
I mean, I think the only real contenders are some of the great white sets from the 30s, Kern, Gershwin, Berlin movies.
But also, the end scene has such an extra element of tension because Oddjob isn't just a loyal henchman. He decides that it's okay to get sealed inside Fort Knox and blown up for the sake of making sure Goldfinger's master plan can get executed properly. And so he is locked literally in a fight to the death with James Bond in this giant gold brick filled room. It's really fantastic. It's not just that it's full of gold bricks. The architecture they worked out of having these multiple different levels and ladders and gangways where you can go up and down. It's the interior geography or geometry of the room is really impressive and just so extremely creatively done. Is this a Ken Adams set also?
Yeah. And a really, really nice touch is that when James Bond beats Oddjob and the day is saved, he opens a nuclear bomb, but of course he doesn't know how to disarm it, because who knows how to disarm a nuclear bomb?
Right, in modern movies he would, right? He would just automatically know what to do.
And instead a scientist shows up, they've been running down the stairways and tells him which switch to, or pulls the right switch. And then James Bond says 3 more ticks and Mr. Goldfinger would have hit the jackpot. And they decided stupidly to change the clock readout to 007, but without changing the line. So that drives me crazy. That's the one problem with the movie.
I see. I never even noticed. They thought it would be a nice call out to have the clock end at 007. I never even noticed that it was at 007.
No, neither did I. I didn't notice it until someone pointed it out. And my first thought when someone pointed it out was, but he says stupid. 3 more ticks and Mr. Goldfinger would have hit the jackpot. So this movie does have a fantastic script and some of the great lines in any movie ever. Do you expect me to talk? No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die. And my personal favorite, choose your next witticism carefully, Mr. Bond, it may be your last.
That is a great scene also, where James Bond is strapped to this huge flat sheet of gold so that Goldfinger can demonstrate his evil laser, which cuts through metal. The way they set all of this up, these things sound a little bit ridiculous when you talk about them, but they feel really real in the movie. And they had to set this up, obviously, or I should say, unfortunately, they didn't have access to a real industrial laser that could cut through metal. And so instead, they had a prop guy underneath the gold sheet with a blowtorch. Not real gold, obviously, but burning a hole through this metal while Sean Connery was sitting on top of it, sort of more or less lined up with where the laser was. They found creative ways to solve their problems. The movie is an absolute masterpiece as a result. One of the greatest films of all time. I guess that's all there is to say about it. If you haven't seen it, you really should have.
It has a car with an ejector seat. It has one of the most exotic locations in any James Bond movie, which is, of course, rural Kentucky.
That is one area where this film may let things down a little bit.
I don't know. I mean, we drove through Kentucky together. It's the only time I've ever been to Kentucky.
It's beautiful, but that's not the point,
It's absolutely beautiful.
That's
and
not the point.
It doesn't get featured in many movies, so maybe it's right.
No, it doesn't. Location. Again, it's not really the point. Is James Bond is not supposed to go to Midwest.
Well, but that's where Fort Knox is. So,
I mean, I know they had to take him to the Midwest, but nonetheless, James Bond is usually supposed to be in more exotic locations. And in fact, where the plot demands that he be in a more boring place, they usually try to intercut more exciting or at least varied places and have James Bond fly over the world. They've really overdone that a bit. In any event, this was not a problem at all with our number 2 Bond film of all time, which is Thunderball. And Thunderball is the first James Bond film that you and I saw, introducing us to the concept of James Bond. I think it was a great introduction. Thunderball has absolutely everything in it. It is, you might say, the perfect... At this point, James Bond was a huge international sensation. They could spend as much money as they wanted, and they kind of did, which is why I think, if anything, the final fight scene might have been just a touch overdone. I've gone back and forth on this because the idea of having a final showdown fight underwater where good guys in scuba suits with air guns, whatever they are fighting bad ones. Spear guns.
Spear guns.
Yeah, spear guns. I thought that was really creative and exciting as a kid, and I liked the back and forth. Then, subsequently, I thought, this is both silly and goes on for way too long. We rewatched it recently, and I still think it goes on a little too long, but that it's a really creative idea, so I guess I'm going to give it a pass.
I had the exact same process. The most recent time, we just watched this together last Friday with a couple friends and my sister-in-law, your wife, who was seeing it for the first time, I believe.
That's right.
And I did not think the final fight went on too long this time, even though I had on previous occasions. Did she... What was Janie's evaluation of the movie? I think that's an interesting
Janie loved
indicator.
Thunderball. She thought it was great. For some reason, the first James Bond film I'd ever shown her was going to be Tomorrow Never Dies. I don't know. I was in a Pierce Brosnan
Because it's so great.
She didn't like it.
You were saying that well, that's a shame. You were saying that Skyfall was better, but you didn't show her Skyfall, did you?
I didn't show her Skyfall. We should have just started with the originals. In any event, Thunderball is fantastic.
The one thing about seeing Thunderball for the first time, that is the first James Bond movie, was the Q scene is a little perplexing. It was a little perplexing. I had no idea who he was. He just was this guy who showed up in a Hawaiian T-shirt and a hat.
It's one of my favorite Q scenes.
Oh, it's one of my favorite Q scenes too, but the first time I saw it, I didn't know what was going on.
Q equipping Bond in the field, and as far as
but
great
just
Bond
like with every
go,
movie since Goldfinger, it's just assumed everyone going into the movie knows the basic tropes of the movie.
Yeah, which is fine. And if you don't, they're not exactly hard to figure out, are they? I mean, it's you can figure out pretty quickly what Q is doing there. He gives Bond all of these gadgets. You don't even need to know his name to figure that out. Of the James Bond gadgets, we focused a lot on the large ones like the cars, but this has one of my favorites of all time on the smaller scale, which is his rebreather, which is a fantastic idea that people have tried to get to work, and that just doesn't on that scale. But the idea was it was a pocket little air tank that he could just take out of his pocket, stick in his mouth, and it would have enough air to last for 5 or 10 minutes, which helps him get out of all sorts of tricky underwater scrapes and is a great idea. And also makes his fight with the bad guy under a swimming pool that has been closed with sort of a metal surface so that neither of them can get up. It makes that fight work really well. The whole thing is great, and that house at Palmyra, which I believe you've seen in the Bahamas, is a great house.
I have visited it. Yes, it's a fantastic house, and it really does have a shark swimming pool. Nothing at all is changed in the layout for the movie. It's got a shark swimming pool and then a human swimming pool nearby.
It's derelict now.
It doesn't. It is abandoned, which is why I was able to see it. Apparently, I triggered an alarm, and a caretaker come and very politely asked me to leave. I guess this happens to him a lot. It's completely run down, but it is remarkable seeing it. And the only thing it lacks that the movie has is a connecting passageway between the shark swimming pool and the human swimming pool. But beautiful spot. Beautiful
And
house.
the idea in the movie is after this underwater fight, James Bond knifes the guy who's trying to kill him and then swims through the shark passage to freedom and encounters a shark, which he apparently did in real life because although they'd built in, as you pointed out, a dividing wall between the shark side and Sean Connery was supposed to have a non-shark side, they accidentally got the sides mixed up, and so Sean Connery swimming through the tunnel.
It was the shark who got the sides mixed up. They told the shark go right, and the shark went left.
I think we blame them for that. In any event, Sean ended up on the actual shark side and was apparently not too pleased about that.
Well, hard to blame him. I like the idea that there's a guy in the James Bond universe who designs shark swimming pools for the bad guys, because it's a very recurring theme in James Bond movies. I can at least 4 movies have specific shark swimming pools for people to be killed in. And I like to think it's just the same guy who is called up every few years by
This
a new
is the
James
only
Bond
one where
villain.
it works, incidentally. Anytime they bring back this theme, in Live and Let Die,
Spy Who Loved Me,
it just
License
doesn't...
to Kill.
Yeah,
I think there's one more.
There are too many sharks in the James Bond franchise. This is the only one where I think it works acceptably, and that's because Largo, the bad guy here, is so extremely effective. But I also want to say this movie has by far, not even close, by far the best exposition of Blofeld and Spectre as an organization, which is set up at the beginning of the movie where Largo, the chief bad guy, goes through something that is essentially like a legal aid office, and he uses a special remote control thing to access a back room hidden by a panel, and then there's this really swanky bad guy den, which is height of 1960s style design, and we see all of the bad guys there, and they're addressed by their, number 3, number 7, and so forth. And Blofeld, who is number 1, not in the books, it should be pointed out, where apparently they rotated numbers, but the head of Spectre is sitting at the front on an elevated platform behind a screen that comes halfway down and hides his face. This is the way it should have been for the rest of the franchise. We should never have seen who Blofeld actually was because he's so much more menacing in this version. This is an incredibly, I thought, scary but effective scene as a kid where all the bad guys are discussing all the bad guy things they're doing, but in the environment of essentially a business organization where the idea, again, is just to rake in as much money as possible, which is also why the movie works out so well. The bad guys in Thunderball are going to hijack a British plane, a British bomber that's armed with nuclear weapons on a training flight. They're going to steal the nuclear weapons, and they're going to blackmail the Western world and make a huge amount of money ransoming the bombs back. That is also a sensible plot, and it's a big scale plot, exactly the sort of thing that warrants the intervention of 007 in order to make things right again. So I think this is a perfect setup, perfect bad guy.
Indeed, all the 00 agents are called in for one great briefing scene in a great set.
Another great set. Is there a single bad set in the whole movie?
No, it's fantastic. Though, when we were watching this movie, I asked you if you knew who was playing Blofeld, and we sort of got cut off and changed subjects. But do you know who was playing Blofeld?
I do not know who's playing Blofeld.
It was C.J. Swan, or was it C.A.?
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
He also plays Professor Dent in Dr.
Wait,
No
is he playing his
Blofeld.
voice, though, or his face?
No, just his body. They dubbed
Just
it.
his body. So it's the body of the bad guy in Dial M for Murder. We wouldn't know that, of course, because we don't see his face.
Well, and he's also one of the bad guys in Dr. No.
All we can say is he does a fine job. This movie has many different chapters to it. And one of the things that I love about the best James Bond films is they do have many, essentially almost little sub-films that just flow well, beautifully, one into the other. And Skyfall is this way too, with that sort of almost separate idea of his going to Scotland and defending against the bad guys there. It's almost disjoint from the rest of the film. Logically, it flows together, but the feeling changes. And so in this movie, we have the concept of the using very clever body replacement, essentially. This was, by the way, an idea that the TV series 24 literally ripped off exactly, almost shot for shot. They had one of their plot ideas to be a guy gets plastic surgery to look like a pilot who flies a stealth fighter, and he kills the original pilot and sneaks onto an Air Force base and steals a stealth fighter. Exactly the same thing.
I never saw that.
24 ripped it off completely from Thunderball. But
This is completely unrelated, but I was shocked how many seasons of 24 there were. Because I loved the first season. I watched the second season. Wasn't that great? And
anyways,
the third season.
that 24 is not worth the same level of discussion, although it was exciting at the time. But that was a real ripoff from Thunderball. But in any event, it begins with the whole idea of substituting a body double for a pilot who's going to fly this plane, which is a beautiful Avro Vulcan, a gigantic delta wing bomber.
And you got to visit one of those recently, which
I did, because the British Air Force Museum, the RAF Museum, just outside London, has one. It's amazing how huge it is. They displayed it as
people think it's a fighter because it's got swept wings, but it's a bomber.
It's definitely bomber dimensions. It's absolutely gigantic. They fit it just so its nose is poking right into the corner of the museum. It's hard to get a really good look at it, but I guess they couldn't fit it anywhere else indoors. Absolutely massive, really impressive plane.
It's a small country.
But the way they do that scene, with the plane doing a water landing and then opening up its landing gear and then floating down to the ocean floor, is wonderful. It's just one of my favorite.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite scenes in any James Bond film. Probably one of my favorite scenes in any movie ever.
And that's one of the reasons I like the final fight, just because I love underwater photography. It's fun.
But
we get that from our oceanographer grandfather, I guess.
This movie also has, you might say, multiple henchman characters, because we have Vargas, but we also
Vargas does not drink, does not smoke.
We also have the dangerous redhead. There's Count Lippy also. And then
Fiona Volpe is the dangerous redhead.
Yes, and Fiona Volpe,
one of
the
the great
henchwomen.
I'd
say the greatest. She's really the most interesting character. Yeah. And they all
She's the best bad guy. Well, Largo is great too.
They all get completely separate storylines. That are interlinked, but sort of are almost developed separately. And you never feel like there's too much. You never have trouble following what's going on. You're always completely engaged. But if you think about it, there are so many different things happening in this movie. They put a huge amount into it. I mean, it's a long movie by the standards of the day, slightly over 2 hours. It doesn't feel long, though. It feels perfectly paced. It's really an absolutely magnificent movie.
It also has, I think, both of our favorite Felix Leiter iterations. The quintessential Felix Leiter.
I actually prefer the Felix Leiter in Dr. No.
Really?
Yeah.
Over Rick Van Nutter?
I do.
I do. Wrong.
I think that he was a little too gray-haired, Rick Van Nutter, and Felix Leiter should have dark hair.
He looks super cool with his gray hair. I mean, he is the quintessence of a man who really pulls off the gray hair.
That's true. He does look super cool. The way we meet Felix Leiter for the first time in Dr. No, I think his voice and everything, as he's just suddenly standing behind James Bond, stopping that fight in the back room, is perfect. And I think that's hard to improve
I think
on.
The way we meet Felix Leiter in this movie, when James Bond punches him in the stomach and then apologizes, you were about to say, hello, 007, or something like that.
Which I never understood, by the way. Like, why didn't he want him to say hello, 007?
He didn't. Well, I don't know.
He didn't what? Try to explain that to me, because we already know who he is. The bad guy is already in the room and knows he's there. So what exactly was he trying to prevent?
and the bad guy's still there when he explains to Felix why he punched him.
Exactly. So that makes no sense whatsoever. But most of the rest of the movie does, and it's a masterpiece. Except
it does rely a little heavily on coincidences, but
does it though?
What can you do? Well, yeah. I mean, James Bond just happens to be at Treblin's where they're doing the plastic surgery on the pilot. He just happens to see the dead body of the dead pilot.
No, I don't think
he happens to look out the window at the right time to see
that's not a complete coincidence, because he's been following around that guy he kills at the beginning of the movie, who is a colleague of Count Lippy's. I think that it all is tied in together through the opening scene of the movie.
No, because he's only at Treblin's to recover. The fact that he runs into a Spectre agent there, his intention is in the movie a complete coincidence.
Well, it works out really well. What can we say?
Yeah, it does. So,
All right. So
if you don't start worrying about the coincidences until the 20th time you've seen the movie, it's not too serious.
It's time to discuss the greatest Bond film of all time, which is From Russia with Love. It is the perfect masterpiece Bond film, even though it's actually a lot less Bondy, you might say, than what followed. It doesn't have all of the trickery of a Goldfinger or a Thunderball. It's much more of a classic spy thriller with a basic spy premise, although we meet Spectre for the first time, and the idea that there's this organization, sort of an international terrorist organization, that has no allegiance to a government and is just trying to cause trouble for its own ends and make money. The idea is relatively limited here. It's not a global plot. They're just trying trying to essentially steal an encoding machine called the Lecter, which is based on, I guess, kind of
The Enigma.
an Enigma machine. Yes, exactly. And so it's actually a very grounded spy plot. And this Russian cryptographer, beautiful Russian cryptographer, writes to James Bond saying that she's seen a photograph of him in the files and has fallen hopelessly in love and will defect as long as he comes to get her. And the British know this is obviously a trap, but the bait means that the game is worth the candle, and Bond has to go try to do this anyway.
Right.
And so
it's a great double trap because they say, we know it's a trap, but we're going to do it anyways. And the bad guys say the British will know it's a trap, but they won't be able to resist the challenge because they're British.
the Bond girl, Tatiana Romanova is the name of the character in the movie, is really good also. And
I think her real name was Dina Bianchi, something like that.
I think she was actually Italian. And in any event, the reason that I love this movie so much is that without relying on anything by way of overly complex stunts, and certainly anything by way of overly unlikely coincidences or any grand set pieces, it is a really exciting spy thriller story. And the way Bond escapes with the Lecter machine and with the girl in face of all the odds is just a really exciting story. It's actually an exciting escape story. That's why I like it so much.
Yeah, and it has fantastic scenery in Istanbul. It has one of my favorite supporting characters, Karim Bey, who is the chief of Station T Turkey, the MI6 agent resident in Istanbul. It has a really great concussive fight scene aboard the Orient Express between James Bond and this evil James Bond, Red Grant.
Which was really well worked out for the time, especially. Without overdoing it, it doesn't have any of the ridiculous sort of we're not really hitting each other feel that you generally get from fights that were filmed in contemporary times. It's a very visceral fight without yet having the degree of over choreography we get in modern fights where they seem essentially to be doing a ballet dance, a very gritty ballet. Yeah. Here, it's just like...
I think there isn't another fight in a James Bond movie this good until you get to GoldenEye and Pierce Brosnan and Sean Bean beat each other up.
That's probably true. And this one, it might even be said to be better in some respects. Also, this is the first time that James Bond gets some gadgets, although Q is not identified as Q. He's called Major Boothroyd, which is his actual name.
No, I think he's called the Quartermaster, which is what Q stands for. Yeah.
He gives Sean Connery this just wonderful briefcase full of all sorts of great gadgets, some of which are real, like the AR-7, which is a little rifle. It's a compact survival rifle, 22, that was designed to collapse into its buttstock. You have one of those. And it's a really great rifle, but it's also very clever, so it was a good idea. They figured, we'll just use some clever things in the movie. They give him this suitcase, which has a flat throwing knife concealed into it, which you have to open in a special way by turning the latches sideways, and if you don't, this little can of talcum powder, which is actually a tear gas grenade in disguise, explodes in your face. It was really well thought out. And then there are strips of gold sovereigns, money in the briefcase as well. This is a handy briefcase. It's a really good item.
And if you think it's improbable that James Bond would be able to shoot the pilot of a helicopter using his AR-7, have you ever fired my AR-7?
I have. Really accurate.
It is absurdly accurate. And it's a very old gun now. I mean, mine is at least 40 years old. And it's a nail driver. It's a beautiful little
rifle, but I don't think the reason that I love this movie and the reason that I think we have chosen it above all other James Bonds is specifically because there's nothing in the movie that strikes you as too outlandish or unrealistic. And instead of getting a whole car with machine guns in it, which is very cool, but a little bit over the top, he gets a briefcase and an attaché case with useful handy things, which you can absolutely picture a real spy carrying in the field.
And indeed, the rifle is a real thing.
This movie
the collapsing hidden rifle.
This movie is all about the road less traveled, or I guess not traveled in the case of the James Bond franchise, because they could have taken this and pointed James Bond in a more almost Jean le Carré serious spy direction, where instead of doing things that save the world from bad guys who live underwater or in hollowed out volcanoes, he's just a spy exercising top-notch, exciting spycraft. And everyone loves spycraft. We love learning about the gadgets and just the clever things and the password exchanges and stuff like that, and how you meet your contact and what if he's a double agent. Things like that are all involved in this movie. That's what makes it exciting. It's a Cold War thriller rather than a James Bond film per se.
Yeah, but it also has all of the really charming elements that make James Bond special, like the fantastic sets. rowing a boat through an underwater cistern
That's
in
not a set. That's a
Istanbul.
real place.
Yeah, well,
which you can
it's
see
a
today,
set
by
in
the
the
way.
movie. They didn't build it for the movie, but it's a
No, I know what you
it's-
mean, but it's a great location.
and yeah, exactly, great location, and on filming on the Orient Express. Not exactly an original idea, filming on the Orient Express, but it's got an incredible charm that set the stage for the suaveness of the movies.
You mentioned Karim Bey, who's Bond's helper overseas, sort of a local potentate, and he is a fantastic character who you also develop a genuine affection for. The Bond franchise has done this well, not invariably, but every once in a while they do a really good job constructing a James Bond secondary character, not a henchman per se on James Bond's side, but someone who's going to be there for him and help him, and who also has a really understandable, likable personality, and even a meaningful backstory. Karim Bey has all of these things. He's one of my favorites ever, maybe my favorite ever.
Yeah, he is my favorite ever. And we mentioned one of my other favorites, probably my second favorite, is Quarrel. And they only pull this off a few times, but the reason that when some of these characters die, it's very emotional is because they've really made them great characters who you care about.
Yeah, I don't know what else you can say about From Russia with Love, except it is our choice, both of our choices, as the greatest Bond film of all time. It's a little bit sad, perhaps, that it is not the direction they chose to go with the rest of the franchise. I won't really say that. I wouldn't emphasize that just because Goldfinger, Thunderball, such wonderful movies which we will enjoy watching over and over again. But I still think this film is the greatest of all, and in some respects, it's actually the least Bondy.
Yeah, and they sort of tried to get back there a few times. GoldenEye was not a full attempt because it still had a lot of big action set pieces, but then Skyfall was another attempt to get back to this, and it set the franchise in motion even more than Dr. No had, and it was on my list of my favorite movies of all time, not just of James Bond movies, but of all movies.
Yeah, Dr. No was a huge hit, but this was a huger hit, and then, of course, Goldfinger was a huger hit. I mean, they had hit after hit.
This established the pre-credit sequence and then having the theme song.
Which is not my favorite theme song, although it's a good theme song.
That's a good theme song.
Exactly. But the main thing is the movie itself. There's really nothing I would change about this movie. I can't think of anything. The bad guys are properly menacing. The plot makes sense. The bad guy commanderess, actually a lady, is played by Lottie Lenya. I mean, you can't improve on any of that. So.
Yeah, you have the sort of charmingly strange idea of Spectre Island, which is sort of like a boot camp for
bad
evil
guys.
bad guys, and yet it doesn't feel silly.
No, it feels menacing, which is what it's meant to feel. I mean, they really hit all of the nails on the head here, which is what I mean to say is that the director goes through the movie trying to evoke a series of emotions, and if he hits every emotion exactly as he wanted you to feel it, if the audience feels it, he's done a perfect job. And the director of this movie did a perfect job. The movie is a perfect movie. It's not only the greatest Bond film, it's one of our favorite films ever, and we'll watch it hundreds of more times. We've probably watched it dozens of times already.
Indeed.
All right, so there we are. We have completed our discussion of the greatest Bond films of all time, wrapping up with our top 5 and the greatest Bond film ever, From Russia with Love. You should see all these, by the way. Even the bad Bond films can be fun and worth watching.
Except for the 3 worst that
Except
will
for
make you physically ill.
Spectre, No Time to Die, and Diamonds Are Forever. Don't watch any of those. But other than that,
they don't exist.
Other than that, even the bad films, there's always something to enjoy in them. It's a great franchise. It's one of our favorites, which is why we spent so much time discussing it. Also a real cultural staple. There are not many things that have been around in new iterations, but still connecting with people after so many years. So it's a wonderful franchise and a wonderful series of movies, of which From Russia with Love is the very best. So thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
James Bond will return when we come back and do something like the greatest James Bond theme songs or gadgets or something. But yeah, thanks. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.